What's up, guys? Welcome into another episode of the Wolverine Live Recruiting Show. I'm your host, EJ Holland. Tonight, we're going to be answering all of your questions. But before we do that, make sure to like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel for free, get notifications every time we drop new videos. Tomorrow is National Signing Day. There could be a special new video dropping, so make sure to subscribe. Again, like this video, help us get in front of other Michigan fans so we can get more questions in the chat box. And if you want even more Michigan recruiting information, head over to thewolverine.com today. Use the promo code UM1. That's $1 for 2 months over at thewolverine.com. Get premium insider recruiting information, team information, transfer portal, basketball, and so much more. Plus, you get to be part of a message board community of more than 8,000 unique individual users. So come over to thewolverine.com today. Take advantage, $1 for 2 months. Use that promo code UM1. All right, guys. So like I said, today's the Q&A show. So make sure to get your questions in. If you want to skip the line, if you want to donate to my travel budget as well, click that little box with the dollar symbol. That's a super chat that gets you to the front of the line. And your dollars will be used for me to get out on the road to see top targets. I was just seeing Travis Johnson on 300 wide receiver yesterday. So again, if you want to support even more and hit that super chat button, feel free. You get to skip the line. If not, we will start with Tyson Smith. And he says, why didn't Ty Haywood announce yesterday? So elite offensive tackle Ty Haywood is the lone remaining target for Michigan in the 2025 recruiting class ahead of signing day tomorrow. I mean, Michigan is looking at some specialists. They've explored some long snappers and kickers and guys like that. But the big fish out there is still Ty Haywood. Now, there was a report from our On3 national analyst, Chad Simmons, that said Haywood would be making his decision on February 3rd. That was obviously Monday, and he did not make an announcement yesterday. Now, I checked in with Chad on Sunday night, and I said, hey, Chad, just want to check in with you. Did you happen to get a time for the announcement on Monday? And he texted me back and said, it's not on Monday. It was a misprint and it was never corrected. So Haywood himself never intended to make a commitment on Monday. Just to make that perfectly clear, it was a misprint. It was a typo from Chad, not to throw Chad under the bus, but he was pretty upfront about it being a typo and it being a mistake. And Haywood obviously posted on his own social media that he'll be making his commitment and signing tomorrow at 9 a.m. Eastern. So I'm assuming he will be doing that on his own social media channels, but it's not like he was supposed to decide Monday and something led him to pushing back his decision. He never intended to make a commitment on Monday. There was a misprint in Chad's story and other people ran with it. So there's, again, nothing that has changed with Ty Haywood. I've had my prediction in since late November, early December, after I saw him during the Thanksgiving holiday, and I still feel good about Michigan being the pick. I haven't heard anything tonight that's led me to believe that there's another school making an NIL run. And again, he did not push back his decision. It was never set for Monday. Again, it was a misprint. So I don't know how many times I can reiterate that, but I think Michigan is still looking good for Ty Haywood ahead of tomorrow's announcement. All right, Tyson Smith back with another one. He says, Travis Johnson, how are we looking for him? So like I said, I was on the road yesterday, had a chance to see Travis, and I'll have much more over at thewolverine.com. I'm not really a basketball fan, but it was good to see Travis moving around, and you can see the athleticism on the court. He put up double digits last night. He's just a really long, springy athlete at 6'3", 180. Michigan has made it a point to add more size to the room. They can continue that trend in 2026 with Travis. He obviously made a visit to Michigan over the weekend. So I had a chance to sit down with his mother during the game and caught up with her afterwards. And she gave the visit nothing but glowing remarks. Travis himself had a lot of positive things to say as well. I'll have an insider up on Travis over at thewolverine.com right after this show ends, actually. So you can go over there to read that. But overall, just quick summary. I mean, I think Michigan hit a home run this weekend. They checked a lot of boxes. I think Travis is excited about the addition of Bryce Underwood, as well as the plans Chip Lindsey has for the offense, creating a little bit more of a balanced attack as opposed to it being very run heavy. He likes the idea of coming in and being able to contribute early and catch passes from Underwood. And I think Michigan's right in that top group, along with Penn State, South Carolina, Georgia, Miami, Texas A&M, and maybe a couple others. But overall, I think Michigan's looking really good for Travis coming out of the visit. They built some good momentum for him going into the visit. Remember, Sharon Moore and basically the entire offensive staff came out to Virginia to see him before he took the visit. And coming out of the visit, I think they made a really, really strong impression on him. Tyson Smith says, did you watch the Benavidez fight? Of course I did. David Benavidez is my favorite fighter. Came away with the dub, so was excited about that. If you guys didn't watch the fight, I'd highly recommend it. David says, have you heard anything about Derek Coleman Brusa, West Coast kid with a wrestling background? I know Lionel Stokes, Michigan's analyst, visited him last month. Yeah, so Stokes did stop by to see Coleman Brusa. Michigan did not offer. If you've noticed today, they've extended a couple of different offers from their travels around the spring. Since Lionel Stokes was the one that went out to see him, I'm assuming that Esposito wants to get a deeper look at his film. They obviously stopped by for a reason. So there's definitely interest from the Michigan side. No offer just yet. So we'll see how things progress with him. David, we have a super chat from Sean O'Hara, and he says, where do you think we stand with Jackson Cantwell? I think Michigan's obviously in that top group. He released his official top schools this week, and Michigan was on the list. I would say they're probably, third maybe on that list. I think Oregon's done a really good job of recruiting him. I think Mizzou is a school that's really high up there for him as well. I think Michigan has done a great job of making him feel like a priority in recent months. He made a visit in December. Sharon Moore went out to see him last month. Grant Newsome was back to see him last week. So they're definitely going all in here for Jackson Cantwell. I think his recruitment will be pretty NIL heavy. He has already signed with Drew Rosenhaus, who is a top agent, not just with NIL, obviously, but in professional sports. So I think this one is going to be one where not just Sean McGee, Michigan's general manager, but you're going to have outside backers for this type of recruitment, like you did with Bryce Underwood, like you're doing with Ty Haywood. It's going to be that type of recruitment. I'm not sure. I think Michigan's willing to spend quite a bit here on the NIL side, but I'm not sure how far they're willing to go, considering you just landed Andrew Babalola. You're likely going to get Ty Haywood. Do you really need to spend 7 figures to get Jackson Cantwell as well? I don't know. I'd rather just spend that on a premier wide receiver, a couple of premier defensive linemen. But, obviously Sharon Moore loves the offensive line. He really values it. And if Ty Haywood eventually ends up being a mauling guard, then you could have, your cornerstones with Cantwell and Babalola and, Haywood in the interior, and you have one of the best lines in college football. But I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. I think this one, it's still early. A lot of NIL discussions are still to be had. So we'll see how it goes from here. Let's go down to David. And he says, have you had the chance to talk with Jake Cruel yet? I know you said you wanted to check up on him last week. So yeah, Michigan made a visit. Michigan head coach Jerome Moore made a visit last month to see top 100 edge Jake Cruel. Michigan was kind of fading in this recruitment. I think Jerome Moore making a visit may have Michigan back in it. I haven't had a chance to talk to Jake, to be completely honest. I usually do some phone interviews on Sundays, but I didn't really get a chance to this weekend. There's just been a lot happening, and I'll be back you got a bunch of visitors, and then I'll be back on the road this week as well. But I will be checking on Jake soon. I think Michigan offers a lot, for a kid like him: pass rushing, production, high academics, being able to reconnect with some IMG teammates. Caden Strayhorn, Donovan Johnson, I'm sure will be recruiting him hard, as will Nathaniel Wusu-Boateng. So yeah, I mean, I'm interested to see where Michigan sits here as well. But I'll have to be I'll have to check up on him and get quotes from him directly. David says, when is Ryder Lyons going to cut down his list of schools? Do you think Michigan is in a good position if he hypothetically cuts his list to 6 schools today? If he released the top 6 today, I would say Michigan would make it. I do think Michigan still has some work to do. He's never been to campus, so obviously they have to get him in for a visit this spring. I do think that will happen. In terms of when he plans to release his top schools list, I'm not sure. You're seeing a lot of kids release top schools lists. I think it's a popular thing to do during the dead period. Remember, February is a month-long dead period, which means that coaches can't go out on the road and recruits can't visit campus. So it's a good time to, connect with coaches via the phone, make some final cuts, start setting up spring ball visits and things of that nature. But I don't know if Ryder Lyons specifically will be doing that. But hypothetically, again, if he released his top 6 today, I do think Michigan put in enough work over the last month to make the list. You had Chip Lindsey go out to see him throw early in January. Then you had Jerome Moore and Chip Lindsey go back to see him last week. So I think Michigan's moving in a positive direction with Ryder Lyons, but definitely some work to do there. Daniel Rebane says, hey, EJ, hope all is well with you, the wife, and your cat. Appreciate that. I'm seeing all these 26 commits around the country. What's the holdup with certain guys like a CJ Sadler and making a commitment to Michigan? I mean, a lot of guys just want to enjoy the process, man. It's February. Like, there's no real reason to commit right now, especially when you're, traveling with like your 7-on-7 team, or just making visits in general, or college coaches are coming to visit you at your school. It's just really early for a commitment. I think you'll start seeing more and more guys drop once spring visits roll around. And obviously you always have that huge wave of guys during official visits in the summer. So I wouldn't really worry about kids committing right now. And even kids that do commit early, like Michigan has 2 commits. One is Brody Jennings, and we already have fans freaking out if Jennings is going to leave. So, I don't really see the necessity in making a real early commitment. I think Michigan's still sitting well with Sadler. He's just generally a very quiet kid. In terms of Michigan just getting 26 commits super early, it's not anything I think you should really worry about right now. John A. Schultz says, why doesn't Ethan join you on these shows? Will he in the future? So for those of you that don't know, we did recently hire a secondary recruiting reporter, Ethan McDowell, over at the Wolverine. He came over to us from the NC State beat. He's been doing a fantastic job, has been putting up a lot of great content. He was actually on the road over the weekend as well. We are I mentioned this last week, I think. So if you didn't watch the show last week, I am planning to get him on at some point, but I think we're going to kind of reformat and revisit how to do YouTube shows and what exactly to provide to you guys. So if you have any suggestions on different types of shows you'd like to see, or just reformatting shows in general, then yeah, leave a comment down below. Kinetic 615 says, what's the deal with Jermaine Kinsley and Jordan Thomas canceling a Florida visit to visit Michigan last week. What's the word on them? Um, so I had a really good conversation with it's Kinsler, not Kinsley, Jermaine and Jordan Thomas's uh, agent. And yeah, I had a great. I'm sorry, I got distracted there with a text. Trying to set up visits to see some kids this week. Anyway, I had a great talk with Jermaine Kinsler and Jordan Thomas's agent this week, Latish Kinsler, who happens to be Jermaine's uncle. You can read the full interview over on the Wolverine, and a ton of great stuff, like more than 1,000 words worth of great stuff on the visit, on Jermaine, on Jordan, on Travis Johnson. So what's really interesting is Jermaine, Jordan, and Travis Johnson, they all share the same agent, Latish Kinsler. So, I mean, that I think Sean McGee is going to play a big role in that in those recruitments specifically. But I think this was a really interesting one. So I mentioned either on last week's show or the week before, people were saying, where's Michigan's junior days? Why aren't they doing junior days? Like, they never really do winter junior days like that. I think they've done a couple in the past, but they really like to have small, intimate visit weekends. And then on top of that, January in Ann Arbor usually doesn't equate to good weather. Not great to sell there. So they usually limit January visits, and they have a ton of guys come in the spring, again, on smaller weekends. Even if you look at the spring game visitors list, it's never anything that's like super crazy, like, oh, you have all these stars coming in for the spring game. It's usually more limited to local area recruits with a few, big time guys sprinkled in. For the most part, they like really small weekends. So how this one happened, it was kind of interesting. So neither Jermaine, Jordan, or Travis were set to visit Michigan. I had just talked to Travis's mom like a few days before he ended up setting up this visit. But they kind of decided last minute through Latish Kinsler, again, the agent, he kind of helped set it up. And so he got Jermaine, Jordan, Travis, and CJ Edwards, a 3-star edge, who also works with them, all out there for a small visit weekend. So it was kind of cool how it ended up getting set up over the course of a couple of days. But yeah, I mean, I think Michigan's in a really good spot for both Jermaine, Jordan. I think Michigan's probably, if Jermaine and Jordan hypothetically drop top 5 or 6 lists, I think Michigan would be in those lists. Jermaine is a huge priority along the defensive line. Michigan really, really likes Jordan Thomas in the secondary. He can play multiple positions on top of just being a corner. So yeah, I think Michigan made a positive move with all of those kids. And the fact that they share the same agent, I think, is very helpful. I think it'll get them all talking about potentially teaming up together at the next level. Customer service says, what are the chances we get Brady Smigel, especially since we almost got him the first go around? Yeah, I mean, Brady is, I think if Michigan really makes a push for Brady, they could get him in the class. If you look at the list of schools that he put out, there aren't exactly a lot of scary schools, especially for a guy that's ranked as high as he is. The lone exception there being Ohio State. And, who knows what direction Ohio State goes in with Chip Kelly gone and Brian Hartline taking over. And, we'll see how hard the Buckeyes really go after Brady Smigel. I think he is a big frame pocket passer. He has some decent arm talent. He showed a little bit more athleticism this past year. I saw him at Future 50 in the summer, and I thought he was okay. I mean, I didn't feel like he was a top 100 talent. I think On3 and 24/7 are correct in having him outside of the top 100. But he's a really good player, really high floor type of kid. The thing I don't really love about Brady Smigel, a couple things I don't really love about Brady Smigel. One, you just landed Bryce Underwood. I get bringing in a high floor guy because you want to add to the quarterback room and you want maybe a little bit more of a sure thing as a pure passer. But I'd rather go for a high upside guy. If you have Bryce Underwood, you're that confident that he's going to be everything you recruited him to be. Bringing in a high upside guy that you sit on the bench and develop for a couple years. I really like, maybe a guy like Oscar Rios, who has more ability as a runner, may not be as polished of a passer as Brady. The other thing about Brady that I'm not a huge fan of is he's old. He's pretty old for his grade. So Bryce Underwood is like 17 years old and a few months, and Brady Smigel is 18 years old and 4 months. So during his true freshman season, if he were to come to Michigan, he would be a 20-year-old true freshman. So I'm not a big fan of guys that reclass like that and then are just really old for their grades. So again, I'd rather have more of a high upside, more of an athlete, more of a developmental guy. But again, if Michigan makes a really strong push, if they really try to get him on board, I feel like they have a really good shot there. If you want to go more of the high floor route, it's just not what I would do necessarily. Kinetic 615 says, how do you feel about Biff? How will Biff impact recruiting? So I actually wrote a story about Biff yesterday and how it will impact recruiting, and certainly in the DMV. I pointed out the states of Maryland and DC, or DC is not a state, but the District of Columbia and Maryland have 7 top 300 players. Michigan is only a top school for one of those kids. You have guys at St. Francis, Zion Ely, who's the #1 edge in America, Jaire Edwards, who's a top 100 safety, who aren't even considering Michigan. St. Francis should be treated like a local school. The connections you have there, the success you've had with Blake Corum, Derek Moore, and others, St. Francis should. I don't understand why the pipeline has kind of dried up there. You haven't landed a St. Francis kid since 2022. It's very sad because I'm partial to St. Francis. I really like St. Francis, but also because St. Francis is one of the premier high schools in America, and you have a tie-in and you're letting that pipeline dry up. So I think with Biff coming back, it kind of reignites the St. Francis pipeline, which is great. Like I said, St. Francis still has elite players. They have 2 top 50 players in the country this cycle. I think it helps with the DMV in general, specifically in DC and Maryland, maybe Nova a little bit. But I think Biff's very widely respected across the private schools in the DMV. I think he will help Michigan get back in it with some of the big-time DMV recruits. Not only do you have Ely and Jaire at St. Francis, you also have Emmanuel Iheanacho in the DMV, who's a 5-star offensive lineman. I'm not sure that Iheanacho isn't better than Jackson Cantwell. So I think Michigan's kind of missed the boat with Manny as well. So yeah, I mean, I personally love the fact that Biff is back on staff. I think he'll help the team out a lot, and I think he'll help out DMV recruiting a lot, which is great to see because Michigan's landed so many great kids from the DMV, and they've kind of struggled in the region the last couple of cycles. They've landed a few guys like Kainoa Winston, but they should be having more success in the DMV and at St. Francis. So I love the Biff hire. I love that that's going to change. So I really expect them to, help Michigan ramp up their recruiting charge in the DMV. Before we move on, we have more than 130 viewers right now. So it's a great time to remind you guys to like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel for free, get notifications every time we drop new videos, and also subscribe to the Wolverine.com today. If you want even more Michigan recruiting coverage, head over to the Wolverine.com, use the promo code UM1, $1 for 2 months, get everything Michigan recruiting, transfer portal, the team, basketball, and so much more. And also, guys, if you want to skip the line, if you want to donate to my travel budget so I can continue to see top recruits around the country, then hit that little box with the $. That is a super chat, and you can skip the line. All right, Wolverine Casual says, you mentioned a lot of Michigan players struggled at the All-Star game. Babalola let up 2 sacks but didn't drop, but Marsh dropped precipitously. Okay, that was a big word. Must have really not liked what they saw. What happened? Um, so I don't think a lot of Michigan guys really struggled. I thought Caden Strayhorn was solid at Under Armour. I thought, Jasper Parker just didn't get a lot of run at the Polynesian Bowl. Nate Marshall had a really strong game at the Navy game. He obviously made a big jump in the rankings. I thought Jordan Young was okay. He moved up a few spots. I thought Andrew Babalola was up and down, but kind of flashed. I think with Babalola, the difference between a guy like Andrew Babalola, if we're going to talk about Babalola kind of struggling and Marsh struggling, here's the difference. When you're talking about Andrew Babalola, you're not really looking at what you have right now. You're looking at what he can become. You're talking about a guy who's only been focused on playing football for 2 years. He didn't start on varsity until he was a junior. He has a basketball background and primarily focused on that. So he's a big dancing bear with so much potential. He struggled against elite competition. I thought he had some really positive reps, though. So I don't think he struggled like that bad. Yeah, he had a few really negative reps, I guess. But again, you're talking about a guy who has tremendous upside, tremendous ceiling, and he's way out in Kansas. He's not playing against Division I pass rushers on a daily basis. This was probably his first exposure to going up against Power 4 pass rushers on a regular basis throughout the week at practice and then in the game. And not only that, Babalola did have an up and down game performance, but during practices, I saw a bunch of clips where he did really well too. So I think with Babalola, you're going to have to fight through the learning curve. You're going to have to get him to polish up his technique. You're going to have to put more strength on him. He's more of an athlete right now. Again, he has that basketball background. So I don't think he's ever fully focused. He even played basketball last year. So he's never had an off season where he's lifting and putting on muscle mass and just getting stronger. So I think with Babalola, you're projecting into the future. You're talking about a guy who's close to 6'6", 295 pounds, but you saw him at the All-Star game. If you watched it on TV, he's kind of thin, right? So he has the ability to add a lot of weight, a lot of good weight, and a lot of muscle mass to his frame. So I think with Babalola, you're not expecting him to come in and be a day one starter at tackle. You're going to have to sit him. You're going to have to develop him in the strength and conditioning program. But once he's close to being a finished product, you should be getting that 5-star level player. The difference with Andrew Marsh is he's a guy that's been on the recruiting scene forever. I heard about Andrew Marsh many years ago. He's been on the recruiting scene since he was like in middle school. He has been playing football at a very high level in the state of Texas. He plays in one of the biggest classifications. He plays against Division I guys in his own district. I think with Andrew Marsh, you have a guy who is already a really, really good football player who can come in and contribute as a true freshman, but may not make those yearly progressions. He may not make that big jump ever because he's already a guy that I think is, I hate to say the word finished product, but he's a guy that already checks a lot of boxes that I'm not sure how much better he can get in a lot of areas because we're already, I think, seeing most of his best in those areas. And what those areas are, he's terrific in the air. He's one of the best in the air pass catchers in the country, has really strong hands, great in the open field in terms of physicality. He's really hard to bring down. I mean, if you get him going on a drag route, for example, he's a guy that can turn up and take it, and turn it into a 60-yard gain because he's so physical. He's such a physical runner after the catch. He's a terrific blocker as well, which will serve him well at a place like Michigan. He's not a guy with elite speed. How much faster are we going to see him get? It's tough to really gauge. I think there's some speed question marks. I think there's some question marks in terms of just his agility. And that's something that was pointed out by our On3 rankings director, Charles Power, how well Does he move in the open field? He's a guy that can run you over, but can he really run around you? I think Andrew's a guy who's not necessarily going to be a speedy vertical threat. I think he can, outleap guys with the ball in the air, but he's not a guy that's just going to toast defenders. But again, I think with Andrew Marsh, you're seeing a high floor guy who's really, really good versus a guy who is nowhere near his ceiling. And sometimes when you're doing recruiting rankings, you have to keep that in mind. You're projecting. You're not ranking the best high school players in America. It's like we talked about with Jaden Davis over and over. I told you guys, I don't give a shit how many passing yards this guy has. I don't care how many touchdowns he throws for. I don't care about the max prep stats leaders. We're projecting, right? So that's why Andrew Marsh dropped. Now, do I agree that Andrew Marsh is a 3-star? Absolutely not. I think Andrew Marsh is somewhere between the top 100 and the top 200. So I don't agree with where On3 has him, but I do understand why he's dropped, throughout the cycle. I think you're seeing a guy who, again, is really good. I think he's going to play at Michigan as a true freshman, especially looking at the talent in the room. But again, when you're doing recruiting rankings, there's more that goes into it other than just looking at what a guy does, from a production standpoint. We got to Sean O'Hara, John A. Scholl. Oh, we already went over the 30-minute mark because I had that long-winded soliloquy with Andrew Marsh. We'll try to answer these questions quickly. Remember, last call for super chats. EJ, do you think states that are trying to exempt NIL for state income tax, like Georgia is trying to do, will have an advantage in recruiting going forward? I'm not sure. I'm not really sure what that entails. I am not a big tax guy. Actually, one of our members on the fort does my taxes every year. Shout out to that guy because I don't know anything. So I'm not really sure. I mean, I'm sure certain schools or states are trying to give their schools, their big state schools, competitive advantages, but I'm not sure how much it will help or not help. I don't even know how much I get taxed in Virginia, to be honest. Wolverine Casual, has anyone done a meta-analysis on evaluators to see how high their hit rate is? Any evaluators you really respect and think are especially good? The problem with, I always go back and do the guys that I hit on and missed on for Michigan. So I did it last year with the 2020 class, and I'll do it again this year for the 2021 class. I've been meaning to write that. I just haven't had a chance to. But the problem with team guys, right, is you don't have a lot of guys going out and evaluating. You do have some guys that travel and do a great job of getting out on the road, but they don't really provide their thoughts. I actually had this conversation with Ethan the other day. It's hard to be a team reporter and be an evaluator, because if I give you an evaluation like I did with Jaden Davis, you'll get upset, right? And then you'll have, the family get upset. And then they'll come after me because I said little Johnny's not a 5-star, right? Or not a high 4-star, whatever the case is. So a lot of time, and it already happened to me once this cycle. It's barely February. We already had a family get upset because I said I didn't think this recruit was a 4-star, not even a 5-star, just a 4-star. And if you're a team reporter like me, it's negative to you to do that. It's a negative for me to say, I think little Johnny is a 3-star. I think little Johnny's overrated, because one, that kid's likely not going to talk to me. And two, Michigan will get upset about it. And then three, you kind of just lose some access there in general. So, when you look at team reporters across the country, outside of me, who else is doing evaluations? What other team reporter is doing evaluations and giving honest takes? And I don't mean saying every Ohio State signee is the greatest player ever, because all the Ohio State guys do that. So who's actually going out and giving you evaluations? There's no real team writers out there doing that, because you can burn bridges with recruits, you can burn bridges with coaches, you can burn bridges with the program you cover. But I have always taken the stance that, I feel like it's part of my job. And if I'm going to be out on the road, it's best to give you the, my honest opinion and the best take I can provide. I'm not saying I'm the best evaluator ever. Even if you go back and you look at, the hits and misses from the 2020 class, I did have a lot of misses. I had some great hits like Zinter and Corum and stuff, but I also had some bad misses there. I don't remember who, but I'm sure Osman Savage I thought was great, and he ended up being a complete bust. So, it just happens sometimes. In 2021, I thought Lewis Hansen was going to be really good, and he's a UConn now. So sometimes you're going to hit and miss. College coaches hit and miss, but I think in terms of team reporters, nobody's out there giving their opinion. That's why, like Sam Webb and Bryce Marich and those guys, they don't give you opinions. Everybody's great. Everybody that signs with Michigan is great. Same thing with rivals. They're not giving you their opinions. Everybody that signs with Michigan is great. And that's how it is across most major beats. Nobody wants to upset the coaches. Nobody wants to get upset. Nobody wants to upset the kids. Nobody wants to have a dad call them out on the radio. It is what it is. But I think I owe it to you guys that are paying for the information or taking your time here to come watch me to give you a fair opinion. If you don't like it, you don't like it, but, I feel like I do my best to give you the most accurate opinion. So outside of me, I can't really point to other, team writers. I think in terms of the rankings department, I would say Rivals and ESPN are the worst. I think Rivals bases their opinion too much on their own camps, and they don't really have, they kind of just give they cycle through so many national analysts, and then they just like give those guys the leeway to put out rankings. So I think theirs are bad. And then ESPN, I think theirs are bad because they just don't invest a lot into any type of recruiting coverage. And then their rankings kind of reflect that. Now, ESPN has a partnership with the UC Report, which runs the Under Armour camps, and they do a fantastic job of putting on those camps and getting all these measurables and verifiable data. And Under Armour and the UC Report, they have the best camp circuit in the country, but ESPN itself doesn't have any guys that are putting the rankings together that can do a serviceable job. They just don't have the resources, or they refuse to put the resources into that. So I would say 24/7 and On3 have the best rankings because they have the resources and they put in the amount of time. They hire people specifically to sit in basements and watch film. They have guys go out on the road. So, I think the two networks that will have the most accurate rankings are probably On3 and 24/7. I know I said I was going to speed through the questions, but you guys keep getting me on questions that make me go on these long-winded answers. So let's try to speed through so we don't keep the producer here all night. If you haven't answered already, what do we know about Davion Brown, CJ Sadler, Dakota Goran, and Matt Punatoski? Davion Brown just released his top 5. He included Michigan in it. He's an On300 wide receiver out of the great state of Virginia. I went out and saw Davion play basketball last week. I'll have a full interview with him sometime this week. And yeah, I really like Davion. He's a really interesting build prospect. He's like 6'1", 200. So he's not super tall, but he's a really compact, thick build, strong kid, physical kid. Really intriguing prospect. Michigan has never hosted him for a visit, so they did a great job of getting in that top 5 without a visit. He'll be on campus in the spring. Michigan's still looking good for Sadler. I think Michigan leads for Dakota Goran, top 100 2027 wide receiver coming out of the visit. Michigan just offered Ohio quarterback Matt Ponatoski. I think the Wolverines will have a good shot there. Same school as Jordan Marshall. John A. Schultz says, EJ, if Michigan could fast forward and end up with Malachi Lee, Darius Gray, Carter Scruggs, and a center prospect on the offensive line, do they take that haul? Would you? Yeah, I'd love to have a Jackson Cantwell or an Emmanuel Iheanacho, but I think that's a great group. Darius Gray is my favorite interior prospect nationally. I think he's that good. Malachi Lee, obviously a mountain of a man who has a ton of potential as well. Carter Scruggs, kind of a versatile guy that can play inside out. And then center prospect, throw in Jax Tanner from Idaho in there. And I think that's a really good haul. Sean O'Hara says, what other premier wide receivers are we on? I think, I mentioned it earlier, Michigan will explore NIL options with Chris Henry Jr. That's going to be a tough pool, obviously. I think that, obviously they're in a good spot with Travis Johnson. I think they're in a decent spot with Davion Brown. Mason James is another on 300 guy. I don't know, man. I think Michigan should make a move for more top 100 wide receivers. There just aren't a lot of names out there right now. Wolverine casual. What is going on with this, man? I keep going from like dark to light. Ty Haywood dropped from being a 5-star. Did he regress his senior season? Also, who are the most underrated recruits in the 25 class? Jasper Parker, Nathaniel Usubotang, Shamari Earls. The reason Ty Haywood, I think, dropped from being a 5-star to being a 4-star is he was originally rated as an offensive tackle. And while I think he can eventually play right tackle, I see him as more of a mauling guard. And I think guard prospects are a little more undervalued than tackle prospects. So, for example, like Darius Gray this cycle, I think he's probably the best guard in the country, or has an argument as the best guard in the country, but he'll always be kind of on that 5-star border, which he is right now. And I think with Haywood, you saw more people kind of grading him a little more as an interior. So his value from a rankings perspective went down a bit. I mean, he's still an elite guy. I mean, he's still top 50 on the industry ranking. And I always said I had him somewhere in that 30 to 50 range. So, I don't mind it. As far as most underrated recruits, I mean, Shamari, to me, is a 5-star. I think he'll outplay the rankings. It sucks for Shamari and Nathaniel Usubotang because they missed their senior seasons. So I think that's why they dropped. But I mean, I would think that makes them underrated because they did drop. I think they'll outplay their rankings. David Ross says, what advantage is it to Michigan to recruit these fullback tight end types like Eli Owens? I thought fullback was a dying position, just a staple of Michigan Harbaugh offense, or can Owens be more? I mean, Michigan's gotten some really good production from Max. So, I mean, Eli can fill that role, and there's room for a role like that. So, if he turns out to be just like Max, then I think that's great. But I do think Eli offers a little more as a pass catcher. He is a guy you can put into the slot. He is a playmaker as a receiver. When I went to go see him live this fall, he had that crazy Odell Beckham-like catch. If you didn't go see it on my timeline, go look it up because it's pretty awesome to see. So I think Eli does offer more as a pure receiver, but worst case, if he's exactly like Max, there's definitely a role for that in this offense. Wolverine Casual said, how would you rate the different Michigan coaches on recruiting? What do you think of Bellamy? I think Bellamy's in a tough spot, and I think everybody puts down Bellamy. Like, he's out there, he's active, he's a good relationship builder. He's a former high school coach who knows how to relate to coaches, to kids, but it's hard to recruit wide receivers to Michigan when the receiver production hasn't been there, when the offense has been extremely run heavy, when up until the last couple of months, you haven't really had big time NIL. Now that Michigan has NIL backing, now that Chip Lindsey is set to bring a more balanced attack, now that you have Bryce Underwood on the roster, I think it's time for Bellamy to start producing results. But up until this point, I think it's been really tough to, put the blame on Bellamy. John A. Schultz says, EJ, yes or no, Michigan finishes with more top 100 recruits in 26 than they did in 25. It's early, but yeah, I mean, I could see them with more, especially with the increase in NIL. So, I would say over, under, I don't even know how many exactly there were this cycle, but let's just go with 7. Noah Wolfenbarger says, do you know any names of wide receivers that Michigan will be trying to get during the next transfer portal? It's tough to give you spring portal names because they're not in the portal. I do think they'll revisit Skylar Bell and then see what other receivers hop in the portal. Wolverine Casual says Olesh's dad did an interview with Penn State Beat saying he was actually down to Oregon, Penn State. Were you annoyed at all that they had you make the drive to his announcement? I think Andrew's dad was maybe down to Oregon and Penn State. His mom wanted him at Michigan so bad. She was so mad at the announcement ceremony. And, it is what it is. I like covering Andrew. I will always be an Andrew Olesh fan. I even texted Andrew the other day and said, congrats on, being a 5-star. I always believed you were one. So, I have nothing but love for Andrew. David says, EJ, did you know the U in cruel is silent? His last name is more like Krell. I did not know that. He has never corrected me, but thank you. Wolverine Casual says, how would you compare Underwood's game to Tavion St. Clair and Keelan Russell? I have not watched enough Keelan Russell to really, give an accurate assessment. And honestly, I haven't watched enough St. Clair to give an accurate assessment either. But from what I have seen, I will say St. Clair is a very accurate, polished passer. I think that Underwood is a better athlete, has a bigger cannon for an arm. And I'm really looking forward to seeing those Michigan, Ohio State games with them as the respective quarterbacks. Wolverine Casual says, why does it seem like 24/7 and On3 ratings are more legit than ESPN and Rivals? Is that actually true or public perception? I just kind of answered that. I think 24/7 and On3 invest more resources into their scouting and rankings department. I think Rivals is kind of disorganized and relies really on their camp series as well as their national analysts, which get cycled in and out. It's like every day they announce a new national analyst. And then ESPN, they rely heavily on the UC report and Under Armour, and they don't have their own real scouting department. So that's kind of why. John A. Schultz says, how would you compare Oscar Rios to other high upside quarterback prospects? Michigan almost landed with Carter Smith. Who do you like better as a prospect? That's a good little comp. Yeah, I think that Oscar is actually further along as a pure passer than Carter was. I think that Rios is close to Carter as a runner. I would say Carter is more physically imposing than Rios. Rios is really thin. He's not as physical of a runner as Carter. I think Carter kind of appeared thin, but he can run you over. Oscar is really thin. He needs to add some weight, but he's fast, man. He's elusive, great escapability in the pocket. Again, I think he's a better pure passer than Carter, but still needs some work there. But yeah, I mean, like I said, my preference is to take a high upside quarterback after Bryce Underwood, preferably a guy like Rios who has mobility. Moose says, EJ, what went wrong? We have a super chat. How much hot sauce could you drink before pooping yourself? Says Nick. How much hot sauce? I mean, I'm Mexican. I can handle hot sauce pretty well. So I don't know, man. I feel like I eat those 10 packs of mango habanero wings pretty easily. So I would say take a lot. Moose 12 says, what went wrong with Zaire Mathis? I'm hearing Michigan decided to go another route because of his size. Is that true? I think it had more to do with NIL and Michigan being more balanced with their budget. Same thing with Rocco. EJ, did you see the interview with Bryce where he was asked, is a hot dog a sandwich? His answer, a hot dog is a hot dog. Thoughts? That is the correct answer. I did see that clip, and I thought Bryce got it right. I also asked Savion Hyder the same thing, and he said a hot dog's a hot dog and not a sandwich. Now, I have been to Switzerland, and they put hot dogs in this, like, I don't even know, like a Jersey Mike's sub bread type of thing. They like drill a hole into that, and then they put a hot dog in there with some other stuff. I feel like you could call that a sandwich, but in America, it's a hot dog. Tyree Smiley says, who's the quarterback you want Michigan to get this class? Ryder Lyons is the best quarterback on the board, and he would be my preference. But if they can't get Ryder Lyons, who's technically a 27 anyway, I want Oscar Rios. I think you take a fun upside guy after a Bryce Underwood. Customer service says, who is the next great quarterback from the state of Michigan? 5-star potential, possibly. There's a 28 kid at Cass Tech, Donald Tabern. He works with the same quarterback trainer as Bryce Underwood. He led Cass Tech to a state championship. He is the next big-time quarterback. David Ross says, what form of blowback does Michigan actually give you when you provide a negative evaluation? Do they not provide access to certain things? I just think there's like hurt feelings and things of that nature, but obviously I still have access. And Mark Marksky says, how confident are you in us landing Ty Haywood tomorrow? I'm confident. I'm sticking with my prediction for the Wolverines. And the last question is, do you enjoy the Michigan beat? Yeah, I mean, I enjoy the Michigan beat. I think things have just changed dramatically over the last several years, and it could have been with any beat in terms of NIL and transfer portal and things of that nature. I mean, my favorite class is still the 2021 class with JJ and Donovan and Junior and those guys. So, overall, yeah, I mean, there's obviously a section of the fan base that will always, just want sunshine and rainbows. But I feel like, we have a good subscriber base over at the Wolverine. We obviously have a good chat box here on the YouTube channel. So, yeah, I'm still enjoying it. Still have 2 years left on my contract, so you guys have me for that long. All right, guys. So if you don't just want to join the chat box, if you want to head over to thewolverine.com, you can do that. Subscribe today for $1 for 2 months. Use the promo code UM1. Get insider information over at thewolverine.com on everything Michigan recruiting. Join us tomorrow as Ty Haywood gets ready to make his decision. And also like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel for free, get notifications every time we drop a new video. Surprised nobody commented on my LimeWire shirt, throwback, but I will see you guys next week, not last week.